Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Dan's Astrology. I'm your host, Dan, and on my mind today is the retrograde of Uranus back into the sign of Taurus. And I thought for this video, I'd focus in more specifically on the topic of technology. The reason for this is because Uranus has been in this trine aspect to Pluto in Aquarius. And when we think about Pluto in Aquarius, trine Uranus in Gemini, a lot of what comes to mind is the a certain kind of cyberpunk futurism, basically, because we're looking forward to this next period of time in the future with Uranus and Gemini, bringing advancements of all kinds of new technological innovations that could disrupt things and change the landscape of our economy. So there's some kind of thing where we're anticipating, looking ahead for the future of what's going on, but we're in this current transit. We have a Uranus in a retrograde motion going back into Taurus, where it's kind of setting off sextiles to Jupiter in Cancer and to Saturn and Neptune in Pisces. So it's shifting out of this whole thing of the air into an earth and water. And because Jupiter in Cancer is exalted in water, there's a kind of a positive energy around this, which reminded me basically of the concepts of optimism and pessimism in terms of technology. And I'd also like to factor in if you consider, I have recently read a book by the popular critical theorist, philosopher Byung The Spirit of Hope. And Byung defines hope as being different than optimism and pessimism, because optimism and pessimism deal specifically with what is established to be known, whereas hope is actually more closer to being like a positive form of anxiety. Whereas if fear and anxiety is not so much rooted in what is known and what is actual, but what could be, then hope is instead a positive anticipation for a positive thing around the corner, or a positive unknown, right? Now, with that in mind, I think the opportunity of a retrograde motion of Uranus back into Taurus, back into the where it previously was before making this forward march through Gemini, there is before we get all into this topic of the future and what may develop or whatever, and the good and the bad, I think that there's I think it's worth it, basically, to take time, rather than be caught up on projections of where everything could go, is to take stock of and take account for where we are right now, and the fact that where we are right now is perhaps not a place to be entirely pessimistic about, right? Now, the thing is, keep in mind, there could be plenty of valid reasons to be pessimistic as well, but there's some kind, in the midst of all, my point of this is not to negate or entirely invalidate a kind of a cynical or pessimistic attitude against technology, but rather to make positive affirmations that could stand up in spite of the negatives, right? Now, one of the things that I would like to highlight is the medium itself, right? Now, as you're watching me record a video on a piece of software called OBS Studio, which is entirely free, and it is quite a great piece of software that includes all sorts of features that are very handy and stuff like this, and I didn't have to pay a nickel or a dime for it. And apparently, if you wanted to go in Linux, you can even get this on Linux. And there are also, if you look at my logo in the corner there, I put that together in a piece of software called GIMP, which is perhaps an equivalent to Adobe Photoshop, which is freeware, and it may even be better than Photoshop, right? Yet you can also edit together things on Davinci Resolve, a freeware. We're in an era where if you wanted to save some money on software, there are so many options of very quality programs that are completely free, and yet in the midst of all the things going on right now, where we have monopolies of tech giants who want to charge us cloud rent for you have to pay out the ass for Adobe Creative Suite or pay monthly subscriptions for all this stuff. We have all these opportunities to just avoid that and have things for free, right? And it's a very practical way. Like if you're not, the other certain things is that it's kind of cliche almost now that people say is that if you use any service that is apparently free, it's like that you are the product, right? But I think that there's some kind of thing to consider with YouTube, in that YouTube, like, you have to consider that it costs money, obviously, to run servers to host videos, and that high-res video is going to take a lot more memory than just doing a audio-only podcast or writing text. And YouTube, the thing is, you're sort of like, I guess what the problem with YouTube is that you're kind of making a deal with the devil, because what they give you is an unlimited amount of video upload time, right? I could basically sit here and hit record and just talk as long as I goddamn want, and there's no limit, basically, right? And then aside from the fact, obviously, that there are some controls of certain if I went too overboard in certain areas, perhaps I might I think it's important as a YouTube creator to test the limits to see what you can get away with, basically. And like, but the most problematic area I find is like copyright restrictions, right? So if you are stick to this thing of creating entirely original material, and you're not infringing on somebody else's copyright, that you really have, like, you are the master of your own channel. There's no, you don't have to conform to anybody else's like standards of how you are supposed to make a video. And if so in the thing, like, if I wanted to make, for example, a video about Zoran Mamdani winning the election in New York, and I decided to just fill it with a bunch of references to like Vancouver punk rock bands, and be like, the point, like, I'll just make a side here into any what I took a certain approach to making videos where I'm optimistic about this platform because it gives me a certain kind of leeway to express myself and my own position, and that I'm also admitting that, like, when it comes to things like dealing with certain current events in America, I'm basically limited by the fact I've only ever been to Seattle before, right? And so it's like, if you want to have like the unfiltered, just like the unfiltered divination of you can pull your own goddamn tarot cards or look at the stars. If you want to ask some dude who lives in Vancouver about what's going on in New York, I'm going to give you the unfiltered perspective of what it's like to be a young man who's never been to New York, who's nonetheless very enthusiastic about a Zoran Mamdani victory. But at the end of the day, it doesn't make any real difference to my life directly. But at least there's a sort of like cultural, I've had people I used to hang out with that, They moved to, they went and did stuff in New York, and then I never talked to them again, right? Like, it just, these portals that just suck people in, and then you just never see them again, right? So instead, I'm in a kind of a desolate, isolated environment, but it's a utopian socialist society where I have a lot of free time on my hands, and YouTube in this context gives me the opportunity to express myself however goddamn I want, and the only form of basically, and if somebody leaves comments, you know, it's like take it or leave it, basically, right? I mean, if you don't like it, you don't have to watch. If you just wasted 10 minutes watching something that you could have spent your time more productively, that's your fault, basically, right? The part of the advantage to YouTube is that they want to give you as much liberty to express yourself and have creative freedom and do what you want, and so you're not really, and you're not beholden to having a boss dictate to you to tell you what to do. You are in control, right? And so this is basically what's interesting about the whole medium of the internet and a democratized media in general, is that prior to the internet, when you had something like cable TV, like you would have, because it costs so much to like have a TV station, you had to basically pilot your show, sell it, get funding, and then have all these people agree that they wanted to like keep making your show and funding you and stuff like that. But when you're doing things on YouTube, you don't have to worry about any of this at all. You could be making the worst stuff, and you could just keep doing it endlessly, you know, there's no one is going to like. No, you just have to basically carry the burden of your own lack of popularity. But if you look at what people do for the sake of getting popular, that seems like it's perhaps even more humiliating, right? So I think that like in general, to be optimistic about technology is to acknowledge that there is a certain kind of benefit in being enabled to just carry out whatever whim of free expression you want, and having very minor friction, because most people, instead of like getting into a fight with you and telling you what you want to do with your project, they have better things to do with their time, so they're not going to bother with that, right? So it's created a situation where you can just kind of like spend as much time as you want, kind of just going off with very minimal friction, basically, right? And that if you had a boss, there would be more checks and balances to keep you within a certain kind of like degree of what you should or shouldn't be doing. But because those figures don't exist in this format, you can just do whatever the hell you want. You have unlimited time to do it. Why? And the whole other thing about this is that some people might be concerned about that if you're using these platforms to like scrape for AI or whatever, then in that, like, why not intentionally create content that would be not very good for AI scraping? You know what I'm saying? And it'd be like, because they want to create this thing that is like, they want to use AI to give you the product that's the most efficient for being successful and popular. What if you basically poison the well with a bunch of stuff that isn't very popular, and then so the AI wouldn't want to use it anyways, right? So then you've basically got one thing, total creative control. Then you've also got built-in insurance that the AI wouldn't scrape your stuff, because you're just creating kind of like a pointless noise that'll waste people's time, right? It's like within those kinds of there's so much you could possibly do with that, and I don't think we're taking advantage of this enough, basically, right? I think there's a certain, within the creative parameters that we have for content creation, I think there's a lot of unexplored areas that, are only just starting to open up, right? So there's something, I think that part of what we are experiencing as a cultural moment at this point in time in history is that if you notice there's this weird friction with let's say, the tech bro billionaires, the alt-right, the MAGA and all this kind of stuff. But there's one kind of point that they seem to have a consensus of on that sort of reactionary political movement, is that they don't seem to like multiculturalism, or they don't seem to like this idea of like multi-perspectivalism or something like that. But what's odd about this is that the frontier that the internet opens up by enabling a multitude of people to all express their own perspectives and individuality is precisely a frontier of multiplicity, of a bunch of instead of having a one singular king or something like that, you have a whole bunch of entrepreneurs, a whole bunch of individuals, a whole bunch of people with their own perspectives and opinions and stuff like that. And it's like it seems counterintuitive to me that the people that are building the infrastructure, or the gurus or the barons or whatever you would like to say of this industry, are somehow put off by the very thing that this thing opens up, that is like the benefit, like what is good. Like if you consider this, like what I think there's also, in the current climate and this current, like, you have the Gen Z, the Gen Alpha kids who grew up with the internet being normalized, and a nostalgia perhaps to pre-internet times. Like, for example, instead, there is a certain thing about, like, here, this is a great example. Think about the humble video rental store. Now, a lot of people may assign a certain degree of nostalgia to the video rental store, because when you go to the video rental store, it's like, instead of just selecting a movie to watch from a streaming menu, you go to a physical space where there are the other people watching movies are there in the flesh, browsing. And it's similar to going to like a bookstore, and you have to kind of awkwardly, like, if you want to like rent this one movie and like somebody else is looking at it, you have to kind of like awkwardly stand beside them and like wait for them to be done. And then they're like, oh, that looks like a good one. And you have opportunity for like real life interactions with like real human beings, and then it is kind of normalizes that you are, hey, we're just a bunch of normal people doing normal stuff collectively together, and we can like smile at each other and talk about, hey, what are the good movies? And it's like a social thing, rather than you being like, I'm wasting my life in this cave of isolation and humility. We've taken that out. And so we've become bitter and cynical because we miss the old experience of going to the video store. But we feel like, do you guys remember that when you rented a video from a video store and you didn't return it, you had 2 or 3 days to watch the movie, and then you had to go to the store and you had to return it, and then if you didn't return it, you got late fees. Oh yeah, and then you often be paying more for your late fees at the video store than your rentals itself. And this is a whole pain in the ass that we've been able to eliminate. Can you guys imagine the psychic load that has, this burden that we've all been, like, the whole generation's been burdened with, like, you always had to keep track of, like, oh shit, I got $20 fucking overdue fees on my Blockbuster account, and it's only getting worse because I just haven't taken that video back. I have to do this physical, I have to actually take the goddamn tape back to the store, or else they're charging me for it. There's something about this where, like, we liberated ourselves from that, right? We liberated ourselves from having to do that, but we lost a certain social interaction in the process, right? What we don't understand is that when we're in nostalgia, we only remember the positive thing that we miss. We forget the price that we had to pay for that in these stupid, frustrating late fees. And so when you liberate yourself from one thing, you also free yourself from something else, right? And the point is that but I think that there's some kind of confusion, basically, that we have false nostalgia because we take something that's kind of minor. Like, what if it wasn't actually, what if the person that's in the video store looking at the movie that you wanted to rent is actually somebody you didn't want to bump into, and you're like, fuck, I'll go look in the other. I'll look at the other section and just try to like, look at movies I'm not interested in. And oh, is he gone? Okay, no, like that's like there's this whole other side to it that you might not actually want to bump into people at the video store, and then you could be a kind of person who's been like managing that level of anxiety, and then by the time you get Netflix, you're, oh fuck, good, I don't have to deal with all these people I don't want to see. I can just watch Netflix, right? Hallelujah, I'm liberated from that stupid scene, and I don't have to deal with people. Wow, right? But there's a sort of like, there could be, whether or not being liberated from having to pay late fees and bump into people at the video store is a good thing or a bad thing, it's all relative. It may not really be necessarily a good thing or a bad thing, right? It's just a changing situation, right? Which we may attach feelings of sentimental nostalgia towards, or we may feel liberated from, right? But I think overall, I think that the march of technological progress has all these good things that we may fail to appreciate. And I think that the kids these days, the Zoomers, have a kind of their birth, like, this is the problem, right? When I was a millennial, I went to the mall and I bought a t-shirt that said Atari on it, and it was a kind of a stupid joke because I was too young as a millennial to have ever played an Atari. Eventually, one friend of mine, I think he started collecting old video game consoles, and he might have gotten like an old Atari Pong, and it's like, but what's the point? It's just for like, it's kind of thing. But you have to just do this thing where you're like, they're just empty symbols that reference the nostalgia of somebody older than you is familiar with. And then for you, it's some, like, the appeal of the Atari thing is this arcane logo of like, what the fuck is this thing supposed to represent? Why do people attach significance to it? I don't know. I grew up with Nintendo and Sega Genesis. I don't know what a fucking Atari is, but you wear the t-shirt and you signal to these nostalgic references that other people know. And then you're like, but somebody who was there was like, might not actually be like, it's not that big of a deal, right? And that the progress might actually be more interesting than retro nostalgia, right? So what am I trying to say about this? So imagine pre-internet era, before maybe even just the days of dial-up modem, when it wasn't so normalized that it was just everywhere or whatever. Imagine you went on a road trip, and imagine you found yourself in a little like motel, and maybe there was a gas station nearby, and that you were tired from driving, so you're gonna like take a break before you got on the road again, but you haven't packed very much, and there's only like 3 channels on the TV, and you got to pay for a couple more if you want to watch anything, and nothing's on. And you go to the gas station, and they got some shitty like coffee there, and you look at like the magazine rack, and it's like there's maybe like a Rolling Stone magazine, and there's maybe maybe there's some comic books, right? And like, this is the kind of thing, is that back in the day, before the internet, the whole industry, or like nowadays, comic book franchises have become a Hollywood. They have a lot of value to make endless reboots and Hollywood movies. And in this day and age, instead of that whole thing playing out, what you'd be doing was you just log onto Wi-Fi and you'd be watching the latest Marvel blockbuster streaming in high def on your iPad or something like this, and you would never have to deal with this problem that you're stuck in a shitty motel and that there's nothing on TV and there's nothing around, and you go to the gas station and you're like digging through the rack, and then you're like, oh wait a minute, there's some weird comic book, and you buy this comic book, and then you have the same experience that you'd have with a stupid Marvel movie with some comic book that you buy at the gas station that comes with a free like pack of bubble gum or something, right? Like, this is why, like, there's some kind of like, there's some kind of sentimental nostalgia that people try to cash in on because it's a reference to, in some other historical time, it was actually pretty, like, the point is that it was probably pretty boring. It was probably pretty shitty. You probably were having a not very fun, boring life, and you're looking for some kind of cheap thrill or entertainment, so you go to the bowling alley or you go to the arcade, you pop a couple quarters into the machine, and you see the lights light up, and this is enough to give you some basic stimulus, and it's sort of like, but you feel kind of ripped off. And then, like, there's something where people, because it was a real place you had to go to, and you actually had to like pump an actual quarter into the machine, and you saw the lights, the balls bounce around and light up and stuff like this. It's like we attach all this sentimentality to that experience. But like, what if, like, nowadays you might get an emulation streaming on, and you're just like, wow, the games we have nowadays are so much better. I'm so glad I didn't have to put up with that as the only entertainment. Like, but the problem about this is that it comes off, the young kids seem like spoiled brats because they are used to things which are just, they're used to an environment which is, is more entertaining and more stimulating, and they don't have to deal with that basic level of boredom. But the point is that there is in all of this too, what makes it more interesting and stimulating is that instead of just having to put up with whatever is in on the magazine rack in the gas station, or whatever's on the stupid cable TV in the motel room or whatever, like, you have not only access to the internet, but you don't have to watch the stupid Marvel movie. You could watch some obscure art house. You would have access to like all the cinema in the world to watch. You could watch all kinds of things, right? And so the point is that at some basic level, what you end up doing with your access to the information superhighway is your responsibility, right? And it gives you this whole realm of creative potential where instead of there being some bigwig at the top of the chain who decides what's on the magazine racks and what's on cable TV and what are the sources of entertainment that people go to when they're bored, you now have the choice to just bypass all of those options and make your own choices. And then, or also not even just make choices of what you're consuming, but also create things and make your own creative choices yourself, right? And that, although of course there may be some limitations, there may be some, you may run into, friction if you try to push in certain directions too much, but overall, I think there's quite a good degree of creative freedom that's available in this medium. And I think that's something to be optimistic and enthusiastic about. But this is the thing, is that I think the problem is that the very positive, optimistic, good things about the technological frontier that we're experiencing is precisely what unsettles the holders of power, right? Because it's opening up a new this is what Uranus is all about. It's a disruption and an opening up of a new frontier, but there's an element of the unknown. There's an element of who knows what this new territory is going to be like. And in the face of those uncertainties, there's a desperation on clinging to power, right? A desperation to hang on to control using the lowest forms of fear, intimidation, humiliation, psychological warfare, all that kind of stuff. It's getting really ugly precisely because of how threatening the positive potentials of this technology are. And if those positive potentials weren't there, you wouldn't see such a reactionary back turn to it, right? And I think the problem here is precisely that what we're seeing, the neo-reactionary movement isn't necessarily a reaction against like the civil rights or something like that, but rather the emancipatory potentials embedded within its own project, right? That it's like having I had some health issues with an autoimmune reaction, but it's like, the point is that you've got people engaged in the technological industry where there's a lot of money to be made for liberating the technology from these old paradigms, but then there are also this creates a whole bunch of fear and insecurity about what would happen, and now instead of being centered, the creative project is less centered on the excitement and the positivity of could optimistically, positively come of this, that the people that run the businesses are more like, well, how can we make money off of all the fear and insecurity around this, which is actually just a projection of their own fear and insecurity, right? Because they ran out of ideas of positive things about how to make the world a better place, and instead they only know how to make money by making people afraid, right? And that's why, instead of trying to have a really kind of inspiring seminar about hopeful futures, you're going to be talking about the devil and the Antichrist and how to make money off of scaring people, right? So I think that all of this is basically a fear of the positivity that's emerging from these technologies, and that I think there's reason to still be hopeful and optimistic and positive, but what is that being positive about? It's about the enabling of multiple perspectives, multiple voices, not just one way of doing things, and that is inherently threatening to people, right? And so, in that sense, it may have its pros and cons, right? But I think it's like, if we let the people who find the enabling of free speech, of open communication, of a more democratized information network to be scary and threatening, and you let those kinds of fear-based attitudes define the narrative, then it's like, we're losing the opportunity to be optimistic and positive about things that are worth being optimistic and positive about, and you trying to buy into somebody else's pessimistic narrative, basically, right? Where you don't see any potential for good things come out of this, but only problems to rise, where you then have a monopoly on managing problems that are only problems because you're insecure about them, the problem being like an opportunity for something good to happen. Oh no, we can't, what if somebody else gets an opportunity? Oh shit, okay, thanks for watching.